welcome back. Super excited today to have on my friend Alex Pardo. We are going to talk about some cool stuff, but really, one of the reasons that I wanted to get him on to come talk to you guys is, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time. Same with Alex. I think a lot of wholesalers go through a little bit of an evolution. And this is, Alex, a conversation I've had with lots of people that have been in the business for 10, 15, 20 years. And, they'll start out as a wholesaler and then they sort of evolve into something more and something a little bit different. And sometimes that's rehabbing and landlording. Sometimes they end up in the note space, or they're buying apartment complexes or doing syndications or doing all this. But you took a little bit different path and you ended up in self storage, which I absolutely love, and I'm fascinated. And I am not in that niche or whatever we're going to say. So I definitely am excited to learn some more about that. So before we get into that, though, like, how did you get started? You've been around. I feel like you've been in the business as long as me.
Yeah, man, I've been around for a bit. I got started in 2005, David. By the way, awesome to see you. We were
Yeah.
together in Tampa a few months ago, man. I love what you're doing with your podcast and Easy REI Closing. So just pumped to be here, brother. Long story short, I got started wholesaling in 2005. I
Mhm.
worked in the corporate finance world, quickly realized that working for somebody was not for me. And I had big goals, and I wanted to get into real estate. I had been reading a lot of books while traveling from city to city in Europe. I was
Mhm.
backpacking,
Oh,
and
wow.
the one common denominator was I felt like all the successful people that I was reading books about had large real estate holdings. So
Hmm.
here's the irony. I got into real estate because ultimately I wanted cash flow and all the great benefits that real estate provides for us. I really wanted time freedom. And yet, for 15 years, I focused on wholesaling, which was fantastic in many ways because it was, as you know, it's a cash generating business. The
Hmm.
mistake I made, David, was it wasn't until about 12 years into my journey where I started to take that active earned income and I started focusing on assets that produce cash flow, right? So I got caught in that hamster wheel, the rat race of making a bunch of money wholesaling, but then not taking that active income and putting it into cash flowing producing assets. So I started buying rentals in 2017.
Okay.
And I quickly realized that for me, while yes, I can achieve cash flow and ultimately build wealth with rentals, it felt like a pretty slow and hard grind. And I didn't like that I didn't have economies of scale, and I had to deal with tenants and toilets and all that kind of stuff. And I happened to be coaching somebody who owned a storage facility. This was back in 2018, 2019. And I got an inside look into the magic of that asset class, the
Hmm.
opposite of what I experienced with rentals, right? I wasn't dealing with tenants and toilets and trash.
Toilet. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just it's an asset class that can provide. It's pretty simple to run and manage. I've done quite a few rehabs, but I don't really enjoy them. And in storage, it's low repairs and maintenance. And so it opened my eyes to that asset class. And when COVID came, it was a blessing in disguise because I had already decided that after 15 years, I was in certain ways burnt out with wholesaling. My overhead at that point had ballooned to about $40 to
Yeah.
$45,000 a month. And I said, man, I feel like I've spent all this time building a business that I don't believe is sellable, at least not the way that I built it, if I'm being honest. And
Right.
I got tired of chasing deals, man. So late 2020, I committed myself to storage. And yeah, I've been doing it for the last 4 years now. So
Yeah, I think that's important, and that's a hard thing for somebody that's in that kind of sucked into that hustle culture world of wholesaling.
yeah,
Is, yeah, it's great money, but it will just stop if you stop tomorrow or you want to go on vacation. It generally just it doesn't continue. There's no revenue past the day where you're grinding it out. So,
right,
yeah,
right.
that's kind of what we alluded to in the opener here a little bit, was there has to be that next step, right? And then how do you choose what that next step is? Because everybody likes something a little different, right? Maybe you want to do land development, maybe whatever it is. But I'm always been fascinated by self storage, right? Because of no tenants, no trash, no toilets. As a guy who has 100 rentals, that was a struggle when I was self managing.
Yeah.
So, like, was it nerve wracking to kind of make that leap? Because it feels like you're jumping across the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it does. And no, if I'm being just really straight up with you, it wasn't because similar to when I made the decision to leave my corporate job and get into real estate and start my own business, the pain of not changing was greater than the fear of uncertainty of like bridging that gap and figuring it out. So I think
Yeah.
one of the things that has really served me that I'm hoping to convey to people to try to have a little bit more of is I tend to just be more of a ready, fire, aim, right? Like I think when you get clarity about what you want and why you want it, like I feel like regret is one of the biggest and worst things somebody can live with. Is I never
Mhm.
wanted to get later on in life and say, man, I regret doing this or not doing that. And so, yeah, man, I mentally burned the ships and I said,
Yeah.
hey, I'm shutting this thing down, even though it's profitable. I asked
Mhm.
myself one question. I said, if I'm still operating this wholesaling business 12 months from now, how would that make me feel?
Yeah.
And in my gut, I was like, this is just no longer aligned with my mission and my purpose and my goals long term. So I felt and I knew that after doing a lot of research into the asset class, that
Mhm.
it was here to stay, and it's a very necessary and sticky product. And I started, reading statistics about the fact that storage is one of the most recession resistant asset classes.
Yeah.
It's got the lowest default rate, and part of that is because the expenses to run and operate a storage facility is less than multifamily and some of
Mhm.
these other commercial asset classes. So yeah, it wasn't difficult for me once I mentally decided, hey, I'm going to go after this. I just put my head down. I got some coaching and some guidance because I knew that I could figure it out on my own, but why? Right?
Yeah.
Why when I can learn from somebody who's been there, done that, and that really helped accelerate my success.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's crucial. Again, talking about most of the successful entrepreneurs I know, they do some research. They don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. They say, hey, let me look at what I'm doing. What are the pros and cons? Great, I like this. I'm going to move forward. I had that very same thing of we're going to burn the boats. We moved from Florida. We moved to Chattanooga with literally nothing and almost no money. And but we were committed to the new path that we were jumping onto, and then getting some coaching or some mentoring, right? Like there's a lot of information on the internet. That's true, right?
Yeah.
YouTube has every bit of information out there that you could ever want, but it's a just discombobulated mess, right? It looks like a rat's nest, and trying to figure out who's real and who's full of shit
Yeah.
is a struggle. So, getting coaching, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but that's really important if you want to, sort of skip the line, or, take the elevator to the next or the highest level. Trying to figure stuff out on your own. I did that. I bumblefucked my way through figuring out how to scale to a nationwide wholesaling company, and we spent a lot of money. We figured out new ways to lose money. So, big fan of that. So, but still, like making that jump for me, that's always been a big step. What did you do to? I mean, you had the one coaching client that you said was in self storage, but what else did you do to sort of prepare yourself?
Yeah, honestly, I just consumed myself with podcasts and YouTube videos. But I think here's the key because I don't want people to hear what I'm not saying. I didn't wait to take some type of action because I was in consumption mode. And yes, I think it's important to get a base level foundation of education, knowing what business you want to get involved in. But I understood from my previous experience in getting involved in wholesaling that where you're really going to learn the valuable lessons and experience is in the action you take in whatever you want to pursue, whether it's storage or wholesaling or whatever, it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, man, while I consume some podcasts and things of that nature, I started to, I think one of the keys that really helped me is I had an identity shift, and I no longer saw myself as a wholesaler. I saw myself as a storage operator, somebody, even though I didn't own storage, I would communicate not as if I own storage, but hey, this is what I'm pursuing. This is what's happening one way or the other. And I think the fact, David, that I planted so many seeds with people in my ecosystem,
Yeah.
mastermind communities, friends, Facebook. Like I always tell my storage coaching clients, like when people think of storage, if they don't think of you, you're not sharing enough about what you're doing.
Right.
And I
Right.
think, well, again, whether you're on here interested in storage or not, I think you can still apply that framework and that
Oh
mentality
yeah.
to everything you do.
Yeah, that's so crucial. I've got a friend of mine. He was the first social media professor for the University of Tennessee, and he was here in Chattanooga. And I remember back in like 2015, he's like, you got to post more videos when you're going out to properties and blah 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 blah, all that stuff, and telling people what you're doing. And I'm like, bro, I have a face for radio. I should not be. I don't want to be on video doing all this stuff. But it's true, because once I started doing that, exactly what you just said, like people were just coming out of the woodwork and they were following you and are following me. And, they may follow for a year or 2 years and never do anything. They're just watching. But when they are ready, they know that you're the expert because you're the person that they see every day. And also, there's just that credibility when you do go to somebody and present them either with an idea or an opportunity, they are going to research you and look you up, right?
Yeah,
And if
that's
you're
right.
if you're a young kid and all of your profile is, posing with the Glock and a bong, then that's who you are. But if you're the kid that's out there, hustling, getting into the business and showing people that you're really doing it, that's going to create a higher trust level.
100%. One thing I'd also like to add is I don't want anybody on here watching or listening to us thinking, oh, I need to like shut down my business in order to get involved in this. What I did not know back then that I know now with certainty is the skill sets, David, that you and I have acquired throughout the years in the single family space, whether that be marketing and lead generation, sales and conversions,
Mhm.
acquisitions, dispositions, like all of that translates over into storage, right? So for me, storage was never, even though I decided to like focus on that, people listening to this that have an existing single family business, it's the same marketing. There's a few tweaks and nuances in the way that you underwrite or evaluate a deal. But outside of that, people can add storage to their portfolio if they just shifted their focus a little bit on what to target. But again, it's the same marketing, very similar acquisitions, dispositions. There's not a lot of it's very similar in that regard. And so
Yeah.
people can add storage. And here's the other thing that I think is cool, because the pie is a lot bigger, you don't have to be all things to all parts of the deal. So if you're
Mhm.
really, really good at lead gen, you can generate leads for somebody like me or people in our coaching community and carve out a piece of equity and cash flow in these deals.
Oh,
Maybe,
really?
maybe you're really good at raising money or connecting people, and that's worth some equity depending on the facility that we're talking about.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I never really dreamed about it like that. So, tell me about your first deal, your first storage unit.
Yeah, man. So it was September 2021. I closed on a 43,000 square foot storage facility in Mississippi.
Wow. So one
And
of those kind of self-contained, like an old Walmart or something?
no, this was an actual. It was built as a storage facility, and so
Oh, okay.
I didn't have to do So I tend to focus on low hanging fruit, and what I mean by that is I target mom and pop operated
Okay.
facilities in smaller markets. Like think of secondary markets that have a population between
Mm.
1,000 and 60,000 people on
Oh,
average.
okay.
And what's cool about a lot of these mom and pop operated facilities is that many of them don't implement marketing. They don't have any systems or technology. Many of them don't even have a website. It's not uncommon for me to talk to a storage owner who hasn't raised the rates on their customers in years. So David,
Wow.
that would be the equivalent of like, when was the first time that you bought your very first rental property?
2009. First rental property, yeah, 9 or 10. I don't
So
that's a great question.
ballpark, what was the rent in 2009 on that very first rental?
Oh, I could tell you there's some that are maybe 2 blocks from here that when I bought them, they were 395.
395 a month. Okay, that
2
was the
bedroom 2 bedroom, 1 and a half bath duplex. Yeah.
today. What is the rent on that same property?
1250.
Okay, so there you go. So basically about a 3 to 4x jump.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is because a lot of the mom and pop operators, they haven't raised rates in years. So it would be
Yeah.
the equivalent of you having never raised the rates on your rental properties. And
Wow.
that gives me the ability to go in, identify like what is the average of the market rates. And
Mhm.
if I'm able to buy that facility, it's a very light value add. I'm able to just go in there and raise the rates. And the cool thing about storage and commercial, as you know, David, is that the value is not based on comparable sales like it is in single family. It's
Right.
based on the income that that asset produces. So if
Yeah, I
you're
think
able, yeah,
that's something I want you to talk a little bit about because that's a different kind of shift where, if I raise all of my units $10, and there's 300 of them, like how that like extrapolates out to the value.
yeah,
That's a
it's
key for
huge.
commercial.
For sure. It's something we get to do something called forced depreciation,
Mhm.
right? And so in single family, again, it's based on the comps. Like you can't, for the most part, control the value of that asset. It's based on what, generally speaking, what other properties are selling for in a
Yeah.
half mile, maybe mile radius. In storage, there's a lot of things we can do to raise the income. So, like as an example, we can raise the rents. We can introduce fee income, right? So we can ad fees for auctions and for locks and for insurance and all these different things. All that trickles down to the bottom line. And to your point, you might, as a simple example, if I just raised the rates $5
Yeah.
across 300 units, right? That's $1,500 a month worth of increase, if my math is right. Well, when you factor in a cap rate, which a cap rate is basically, think of a cap rate as an expression of value based on the income the asset produces. Well,
Yeah.
that's $1,500 times 12. And then if you factor in or layer on a cap rate of
2,000. Yeah.
7 or 8, it has a profound and exponential impact on the value of the facility just by
Mm,
raising the rates $5 a unit. It seems inconsequential, but when
yeah.
you layer on a cap rate, it has an exponential impact on the value of the facility. Does
Mhm.
that make
And you can
sense?
do it does. It does to me. I just want to make sure everybody understood it. So yeah, so then you could do it 1 year and then the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. I know because I just signed a new lease and I see it going up, 4 or 5% every single year. So that's amazing. I think that is one of the beauties of the commercial real estate business that we don't see in the single housing or single family housing market. Because I've said the same thing. You can take a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and I can wrap it in gold, and it's still $180,000 house. Like,
That's it, man.
maybe it's 185 now, but you just cannot. It just doesn't work like that.
That's right. Look, you asked me about my first facility. I just within the last less than 80 days ago, less than 3 months ago, I sold that facility. I had bought that facility September of 21. I bought it for 1.592. I was able to
Mhm.
get 85% SBA financing. So the Small Business Administration gave me a loan for 85% of that purchase price. And then I brought in an equity partner to fund the 15% gap that I needed, which was about 350 grand that I didn't have at the time.
Right.
We just sold that within the last 2.5 months for 2.495. So
Wow.
we got the cash flow over the last 3 years. We got a pretty decent equity pop on the sale of that facility, and now we're taking that cash and rolling it into a different market, same asset class. So what I've realized about storage, David, is that people talk about cash flow, and the cash flow can be great, but the equity play is what I think doesn't really get appreciated about
Mhm.
storage. The fact
Yeah.
that we can find these undervalued facilities, we can raise the rates and do some of the things we're talking about, and within 1 to 2, 1 to 3 years, you can turn around, sell that facility, make a pretty big pop, and then
Yeah.
roll that into another opportunity.
That's amazing. That's an incredible story. And then your 15% equity guy, is he staying in for the next deal?
Yes, he's looking. He's like, hey, when's the next one? So,
Yeah.
as you know, with private lenders or equity partners, like
Mhm.
when you do what you say you're going to do, you hit your projections, you follow the business plan, and you execute. Like they're not going anywhere. They want their
Yeah.
money to grow. They know that you're a strong operator. They trust you. So I think this goes without saying, but I think it's worth underscoring.
Mhm.
Always do what you say you're going to
Sure.
do.
Right.
Follow through. Be transparent. No matter. I mean, it's just a general rule of life, right? So uh, yeah, man, it's the cool thing about storage, David, is that it doesn't take very many of these to have a significant impact on your life. When I was
So yeah.
yeah,
No, that's okay. So Alex, what I want to talk to you about is like I'm listening to that and I certainly see it from your perspective, but somebody who may be newer,
yeah,
like, okay, my God, 1 point, however many $1 million, that's scary. An SBA loan, which seems even more daunting. Like, how hard was it to work through all of that? Because that
yeah,
seems like it would be the stumbling block that would stop
yeah,
most people. And in my early career, it definitely would have, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, how hard was that process? And then after that, maybe how did you find that deal, and how hard was it to negotiate?
Let me start with the latter part of that question, and then I'll circle back to how hard it was getting that deal. Zooming out,
Yeah.
anything in any way that you can buy single family, you can apply towards storage. So I have bought storage facilities with seller financing. I have
Hmm.
bought storage facilities by raising 100% of the private money to buy the facility. I've bought it through traditional bank financing, equity partnerships. Like, so you're only limited to how a deal is structured and closed on based on your thinking and your knowledge, right?
Good.
So I don't, by the way, to be totally transparent, the SBA process, that was a bear. I had to jump through
Yeah.
a lot of hoops. There was a lot of things I learned in that process, but I don't want anybody thinking, hey, I can't get involved in storage because I don't have, 15% $1.5 million, or I don't have this or that. Every single deal I've done, I have yet to use any of my own capital, right?
Really?
So it doesn't mean you don't need money. It just doesn't have to be yours. So just know that you can structure these deals in many different ways. Now, as far as how I found this deal, this came from a relationship, right? And that is my favorite way to get deal, is because I planted seeds and I got crystal clear on my storage buy box, right? I'm looking for a mom and pop operated facility in
Hmm.
these markets that's at least 20,000 net rentable square feet. Like
Yeah.
I gave everybody specific criteria. I had somebody that is a friend of mine that I was working with. I'll never forget. He sent me an email and he called me and he said, check your inbox. Based on what you've shared with me, I think I found your first storage deal.
Wow.
Sure enough, I looked at it. Now, it did take a little bit to get under contract. I think it took me, I don't know, 2 months or so going back and forth, trying to get everything wrapped up. And
Hmm.
that's the one that I closed September of 21.
Yeah.
I have also bought facilities from cold calling and direct mail. So
Really?
those have been my three primary ways to get storage deals: cold calling, direct mail, and relationships.
Wow. Was it what took 2 months? What was so hard on the negotiation? Was the
Man,
seller just stubborn or
no, I almost fumbled the bag, as the kids would say. And the
oh,
reason, one of the big learning lessons from that experience, and I'm glad you asked that question because it could be valuable to people listening, is you have a due diligence period, typically speaking, or at least I highly,
mhm,
highly recommend a due diligence period of at least 45 to 60 days when you buy one of these assets. Well, I was trying to get every I dotted and T crossed in the
yeah.
purchase agreement before I went under contract. Like I was
Mhm,
wanting the P&Ls and the rent rolls and all this
yeah.
stuff instead of trusting I knew I had a deal, getting it under contract, then worrying about all that stuff.
Right.
And in that back and forth with the seller, and when you're buying one of these assets, the seller oftentimes has an attorney, and there's just a lot of back and forth. And instead of just agreeing and getting it under contract because I knew I had it at a good price, I
Yeah.
was trying to get the fine tuned details of the purchase agreement ironed out before
Mhm.
I signed on the dotted line.
Yeah, I think for people there that are listening, that's where there's a little bit of difference between buying a single family and buying a business or buying a commercial property
Right.
is, and correct me if I'm wrong here because you're certainly more of an expert than me, but we're going to take the facts at face value that the seller is telling us, right? And work that through our matrix and say, okay, yeah, this is the price that we can agree on. And then, hey, now we're going to do the due diligence. And if there's something that affects those numbers or they were bullshit or something like that, then we can adjust off of that. So
That's
you
exactly right.
yeah, it's a purchase contract, but we're not locked into that. If
Yeah.
something pops up, no different than buying a single family house and, one of the walls in the basement's collapsing. Well, of course
Right.
we're going to adjust our pricing, right? So yeah,
And
I think that's a great lesson.
here's the mistake I made is now in our purchase agreement, we put that our due diligence clock, the
Mhm,
timeline on that 45 to 60-day due diligence doesn't begin until
mhm.
we receive this, and this, right? The
Yes.
rent roll, the profit and loss. Like
Mhm.
back then when I signed the contract, like it started once we signed the contract. And that was a small mistake I made, which, fortunately there was nothing immaterial. In other words, everything the seller told me was pretty much on point.
Yeah.
But that was a mistake I made, and that's why it took so long to get that one under contract.
Well, and this is one of those things that you learn either, from having a coach, and typically a coach who has gone through this and done all of these things and
That's
fumbled the
right.
bag, as they say, right? Like we try to, as people who are really in this business, learn from our mistakes. And, this is where when you hire a coach, they're supposed to get you past at least the easy stuff, right? Like let's not, what is a forced fumble? Let's not screw up the easy stuff, right? And I've had plenty of coaches in my life that have helped me kind of accelerate what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, 100%. And there's one other thing, David, that I wanted to bring up. I talked earlier about how I built this wholesaling business, and
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I built it in a way that it could be sold. Well, with
Yeah.
storage, it's like you said, you're buying a business. It's a real legitimate
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
It has the benefits of real estate. So when you
Mhm.
talk about appreciation, depreciation, the tax benefits, the cash flow, like all the reasons we love real estate, it's all wrapped up into storage. It also
Yeah.
happens to be a real business,
Right.
which is cool.
I
So
feel like it's the best of all worlds, right? It's real estate. It's a business. There's no tenants. Nobody's calling you at 3 in the morning. It literally is the golden goose. I love it and definitely need to explore it more. So you bought your first one September of 2021. Like where are you at now? How many units? How many deals? Talk a little bit
yeah,
about that.
Yeah, 3 months ago, I had 838 units. In the last two and a half
Holy
months,
smokes.
I sold two facilities in Mississippi.
Yeah.
So I sold that one, and there was another one 3 miles away that I sold, and so that gave me a footprint of 80,000 square feet in that particular market. And I was able to, through a broker, we found the buyer that bought that entire portfolio. It
Hmm.
was about 600 and something units that he bought there in Mississippi.
Wow.
So fortunately, we did very well in the exit. And then I also own a facility in Amelia Island, Florida,
Oh,
along with a
wow.
partner. That facility that came from a direct mail piece, and that's when I talk about seller financing. We got 90% seller financing. I found the private lender that funded the 10%. So another deal that I did without money out of my pocket, and
Hmm.
we got some ridiculous seller finance terms on that one.
Yeah.
So that's in storage. These people are business owners
Hmm.
that are not emotionally attached to these assets. And so seller financing is pretty common in this space. I
Really?
find that oftentimes I don't have to really educate too many sellers about what that looks like.
Hmm.
Versus when I was in single family, that conversation, it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, it's very, and all of our properties were all bought that way with seller financing. So super
Yep.
familiar with it. But yeah, it's a little bit tricky. Like, hey, do you need all the money at once? Maybe I can find a way to do this. Where probably a lot of these guys got some portion of how they bought it might have been on seller financing.
Yeah, that's right. No, and this particular seller that we bought this facility from, he is actually generating more cash flow on the seller financing note
Yeah.
than when he was managing, owning, and operating the facility because
Right.
he hadn't raised the rates. He lives in a different state. The facility's in Florida. He wasn't
Hmm.
really treating it like a business. And so
Right.
even though we got really favorable terms, he's actually making more cash passively through the note than he
Yeah.
was managing and operating the facility. So it was truly a win-win in the classic sense of the word.
Yeah. And I used to tell people the same thing, like, hey, you'll make as much or maybe more or at least the same as you would, with your rent minus repairs and minus, the taxes and the insurance and all those types of things, because we knew there was such an opportunity to go in there and fix it up and, increase the rent. So like, so you've got these properties all over. Where are you based out of?
I'm in Miami. I'm in
Okay.
Miami.
So you're
With
not local to any of these.
No, 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 no. So we run what's called an unmanned model. So you know how traditional drive-up storage, there's an office, and you might walk into the office and talk to somebody behind the counter. While our
If you can,
facilities have offices, they're locked up. Like
really.
so, everybody rents the units online. We have a third-party management company that has a call center.
Hmm.
And then we have a part-time local boots on the ground person that is responsible for going to the facility on a weekly basis and keeping the facility clean, doing lock
Yeah.
audits, unit cleanouts. So because of that three-prong management system of third-party call center and boots on the ground, which is part-time, that
Hmm.
is what provides the time freedom, right? Like 3 months ago when I owned the 800 plus units, David, quite honestly, man, and I don't want to oversell it, but honestly, I would spend an hour and a half ish a week managing that portfolio. Like that's it. Now, the time, energy, and effort, don't get me wrong, was spent on the front end to
Right.
identify and find those opportunities. But
Hmm.
once you stabilize these things, they're pretty semi passive.
And I love that the billing is online. It just drops right into your account. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, man. We don't
That.
talk to customers like we like the management company and just the automation. If somebody doesn't pay, their gate code stops working, they can't access the
Mhm.
unit. And by the way, in storage, you don't have to deal with evictions, which, as
Yeah.
you know, can take some time and some money. In
Yeah.
storage, there's something called lien laws. So depending
Mhm.
on where the state that where the facility is located, usually within 60 to 70 days, you can auction their stuff off and get that unit back online to rent.
Wow. And there must be some states that are more favorable to this than others?
Yeah, I would say so for the most part,
Yeah.
but it's because of these lien laws, it's usually pretty standard for the most part, the
Oh,
process.
okay. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had some friends that have been into that, and I remember that show Storage Wars or something where they
Yeah,
would
that's
go
old school. Yeah. Now
going
everything
off.
is run online, like storageauctions.com. So our boots on the ground takes pictures and these
Mhm.
auctions take place online, and then they usually have 72 hours to come and retrieve the contents of the unit. Uh,
Really?
and so yeah, we've never, at least in my facilities, we've never done one of those live, like on the
Yeah.
ground auctions. I think that's more old school.
That's wild. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, man.
So I love it, man. And I know I definitely want to talk to you more about this, but everybody listening will. Like, what does it work? What does life look like for you on the other side now that you're trying to help people get into this asset class? I know,
Yeah.
with mentoring and mastermind and coaching and all that stuff. Like what does that look like?
Yeah, my life, man, has been changed, and that's not like I hope I'm not overstating that, because it really has changed because of the relationships, the coaches, the mentors, the communities that I've immersed myself in over the last 15 years or so,
Mhm.
really. And that's really where my heart is in wanting to teach people how this asset class can change their life and how they can achieve time freedom. So I have a
Mhm.
storage coaching program where I teach people how to find their first cash flowing storage facility within 6 to 12
Nice.
months. So yeah, man, I'm pouring into people now. I get to work with them, show them the business, partner with them on their first deal. So man, so the direct mail letter that I use to buy 2 facilities, my
Mhm.
purchase agreement, and some training. Like I have that all in a Dropbox that I'm happy to
Mhm.
share with your
Oh
listeners.
wow.
Like zero strings attached. Like
No kidding.
there's no fancy funnel or opt-in page. Like we just send them the link.
Yeah.
So if you guys text me the word storage and then put David in parentheses, just so that
Oh
I know
wow.
that you're on the podcast,
Nice.
text the number storage David, or text the
Yeah.
word storage David to 305 318 6213.
Cool.
305 318 6213.
Nice. And we'll go back. We'll put this in the notes in all the Facebook groups and on YouTube when we drop it there. I think this is amazing, an amazing asset class, Alex. I love it because if you're, a very active investor or, wholesaler, this is the perfect bolt on, right? And it kind of moves you in that direction of being more passive, which is what everybody wants.
Yes.
We're all out here playing, real life Monopoly, right? Starting with a single family and going to a duplex and then a quad and then, an apartment building or something bigger, right? Where that end goal is to not have to be involved in the day-to-day stuff so we can be traveling the world or sitting on the beach or whatever it is. But also for all those people out there who have maybe a great full-time job and know that that's not the end all be all, right? Because the world has changed and there's no more pensions and retirements and all that, so they need to put their money someplace. And this is something that you can do if you still have that full-time job, right? If you're the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, or some type of professional. And even better, I love that you talk about how you can do this really without even your own money, just by putting in a little bit of sweat equity and finding the deal. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. If anybody's in a job that they love or maybe that they don't like, do
Mhm.
not be limited to your thinking that you need a bunch of money and a bunch of time to get
Mhm.
in this business, because now obviously anything, David, as you know, takes some time, energy, effort, and focus, right? But this
Yeah,
is not something where you need to go quit your job and devote 30, 40 hours a week to go do this business, because that's just not the case.
yeah. No, that's fantastic. What's I'm sure you've had a ton of successful clients. Any of them that really stand out that had kind of a fun or
Man,
unique story?
well, I'll give you the most recent one. I just had a coaching client. Now, this isn't typical, and all the disclaimers and all that. I look. It took me 9 months to get my first deal, but I was
Yeah.
goofing around for the first 2 of those months. I just had a client join in April. In
Yeah.
August, he closed on his first facility. It's a smaller
Wow.
facility in Oregon, and you know how he got it. One of the things I always share with my coaching clients: whenever you're driving, if you're on
Mhm.
vacation, if you go
Yes.
travel, take a picture. When you see a mom and pop storage facility, take a picture and then call them. Well, he was hunting. On his way back from hunting, he
Mhm.
drove by a facility that looked to be pretty vacant, abandoned. It just didn't look, it looked like it was kind of in disrepair. He
Yeah.
called the owner, and within, I think, I don't know, 2.5 months, he closed on that facility just by
Really.
driving back from his hunting trip and calling. And when we
Mhm.
call, like, I don't ever ask people, hey, are you interested in selling your facility? I build rapport like anything else, establish a connection with them. And then I always ask, hey, look, we're looking to buy our first facility, my wife and I. Do you know anybody in the area who might consider selling their? So we take a very indirect approach.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
if you've done a good job building a
Mhm.
relationship with them, oftentimes they'll raise their hand and say, well, I might be interested in selling
Right.
mine. And then
Right.
that now you're into a different part of the conversation.
Yeah, I've done the same thing with private money. Like even if I know you want, you're the person I want to borrow from. Hey, here's what we're doing. We're paying these great returns. We're doing all these things. Do you know anybody that would be interested in getting great returns? And people are like me, I'm interested in great returns. Yeah,
Yep.
pick me. So cool. I love the phone number and the Dropbox. Man, that's super generous to give that away. What about people who might want some coaching or to get into the mastermind?
Yeah,
What's
man,
some
absolutely. So
stuff?
anybody interested, we can schedule a call, www.storagewins.com, storage,
Nice.
wins.com. And
Mhm.
yeah, we'll just have a conversation, and but depending on your goals and your situation, just see if it's a
Yeah.
fit. But yeah, man, I love this business. I love working with good people who just want to change their life. And sometimes it's not about like building an empire. It's just about, a couple $1,000 a month in cash flow sometimes can
Yeah.
really change people's situations. It doesn't have to be anything like super crazy and big.
Yeah, no, life changing. Um, and again, I love this asset class. I love, how it's something that you can literally do part time, and it can, the appreciation and the cash flow can change your life. Alex, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. One of my goals with this is to make sure that we only bring in the best of the best and people who are actually doing this business and have experience, because the internet is filled with a lot of people who are full of shit. So
Yep.
super excited to have you on here. Something I was really looking forward to. So thank you so much for popping on.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the opportunity, man. Love what you're doing, and look forward to seeing you in Tampa Q1, hopefully.